Hi everyone, I'm Tequila Mockingbird and this is The Path of Flame by yodepalma, a Fullmetal and Harry Potter crossover fic that follows Harry through his first year at Hogwarts if he was raised by Roy Mustang. Chapter 1. Prologue. Roy stared blankly at the man on his doorstep, trying to figure out who he was through the blaring pain of his hangover. He was sure he remembered the old man from his days learning alchemy under Master Hawkeye, but he couldn't quite come up with a name. The stranger was smiling, though, clearly remembering him. He was at ease in his outlandish coloured travelling robes, a wizard from abroad, and he had a bundle held in his arms like a baby. Roy was going to wait to deal with that until he couldn't get away with ignoring it any longer. "I'm sorry," he said eventually, realising he was staring. "Would you like to come in, Mr.
Headmaster Albus Dumbledore of Hogwarts?"
The man introduced himself cheerfully, stepping through the doorway and looking around the narrow hallway briefly.
"I was rather hoping you'd remember me. I was friends with your teacher and spoke with you a few times."
"Sorry," Roy said again, scratching the top of his head. "I remember your face, but the name escapes me."
"Probably the hangover,"
Albus Dumbledore said with a twinkling eye. Roy had to fight back an embarrassed flush. He'd been hoping the old man hadn't noticed.
"I can wait a few minutes while you make yourself a cup of tea if you like."
"Tea?" "Coffee," Roy corrected automatically. Who drank tea for a hangover? "Would you like a cup?"
"I haven't had a good cup of coffee in years."
The old man's cheerfulness was extremely irritating.
"If you don't terribly mind making 2 cups, I'd be very grateful. It's quite the trip getting here from Scotland."
"Sure," Roy said agreeably, gesturing for Dumbledore to follow him into the kitchen. The man followed docilely enough, so Roy allowed himself to yawn as he spooned coffee grounds into the decanter and gathered up the necessary utensils. There was a blessed silence for almost a whole minute before a sound, suspiciously like a fussy baby, came from the bundle in Dumbledore's arms. The wizard made appropriate cooing noises to settle it down, but Roy just rubbed his eyes tiredly. "Dare I ask why you have a baby?" he said as the coffee finished and he poured 2 full cups. Dumbledore waited until he was putting an obscene amount of sugar in his cup to reply.
"I was wondering if you might do me something of a favour, actually,"
he said as he took a casual sip of his coffee. "Depends on the favour," Roy responded dryly as he sipped his own less diabetes-inducing beverage. This earned him a sharp look, but Roy had been in the army more than long enough to face it with a bland expression. Dumbledore didn't respond immediately. Instead, he took a moment to adjust the squirming baby in his arms, opening the blanket just enough for Roy to see its face and beamed down at the kid fondly. Roy charitably pushed aside the cynical voice in his head that muttered how casual of manipulation it all was.
"This is Harry Potter,"
the wizard said finally, his cheerful tone finally disappearing to make room for one much grimmer.
"His parents were murdered late last night, and I'm afraid he has no living relatives left to take care of him. I need somewhere safe to leave him. So I thought, well, what safer place but under the care of a formidable wizard and alchemist. I recall you from my time with your teacher. You always seemed such a responsible young man, and so you thought you'd ask me," Roy finished with a sigh, rubbing his eyes again. "Headmaster, I just got out of a war, and I'm still recovering. I don't think I'm equipped to raise a child at the moment." "Nonsense, my boy."
Oh, God, the cheerfulness was back. Why him?
"Why, having a child around at this time would be nothing but a blessing. I recall, after Grindelwald's defeat—"
Thankfully, Roy was saved whatever story the man had been rambling his way into by another knock on his door. With a hasty "excuse me," he stepped briskly to the door and flung it open. Maze stood on the doorstep with a bag of what Roy hoped was Gracie's home cooking and his usual doofy smile. Roy had never been happier to see the man. "Well, you're looking more bright-eyed than I expected to find you," Maze said in a painfully chipper voice. He stepped past Roy without even an invitation, made sniffing noises in the air, and with coffee brewing even. I'm impressed. Pity you couldn't manage to shower. "I've already had a visitor this morning," Roy said through gritted teeth. Maze gave him a sharp look, instantly concerned, but Roy waved it off. Nothing like that. He's from Scotland, and he's crazy. Crazy? Maze questioned, with a probably healthy scepticism. Are you sure that's not just the hangover talking? He's trying to give me a baby. Gratifyingly, Maze's eyes widened in surprise at the news, though, of course, the expression didn't last long. With a shake of his head, he just walked into the kitchen and put his burden on the counter with a loud thump. Roy walked in just in time to see Maze take up his vacated seat and start sipping his coffee. "Get your own!" Roy snatched the coffee from his friend's grip, pulling it protectively close to his chest. "Mr. Dumbledore, this is my friend, Maze Hughes. Maze, Headmaster Dumbledore, of Hogwarts. And a baby."
"Please, call me Albus," Dumbledore said smoothly,
nodding a sort of abbreviated bow to Maze.
"And this is Harry. I've come looking for a safe home for him."
"Pleasure to meet you," Maze said, nodding back. "Why does he need a safe home? And if you don't mind me asking, what's happened to his forehead?" Roy blinked in surprise, then peered more closely at Harry. Sure enough, there was a livid scar on his forehead, shaped like a lightning bolt. A curse mark?
"Ah, that's the reason he needs somewhere safe. As I was telling Roy earlier, Harry's parents were murdered last night by a dark wizard. Somehow, Harry survived."
"How were they killed?" Maze asked, light from the rising sun glinting off his glasses.
"The killing curse, but Harry survived it."
Silence. Roy and Maze shared a stunned look. Then both turned back to Dumbledore and his pleased expression.
"The wizard who cast the curse has disappeared, but I'm afraid many of his followers remain undetected on English soil. I fear they may go after Harry for revenge, and would like to keep him as far out of their grip as possible."
"Are you certain Harry himself was hit by the curse?" Roy asked faintly. At Dumbledore's serious nod, he groaned loudly and leaned on the counter. "Surely," he said, a bit hopelessly, "surely there is someone else willing to take him in."
"I'm sure many wizarding families would be more than happy to raise him."
Dumbledore's voice was mildly disapproving.
"But Harry is already a celebrity, and I fear being raised by us would give him something of a swollen head. I can't leave him without protection in the Muggle world. Of all the choices I can make, Mr. Mustang, you are truly my best option."
Roy rubbed his face, then turned to Maze beseechingly, but Maze was frowning at Dumbledore's burden, a faint look of concern on his face. When he finally caught look of Roy's expression, he hesitated visibly.
"Maze,"
Roy said, voice just this side of pleading. "You'd leave him in danger?" Maze asked softly, because he knew Roy was a sucker for people in trouble. Even babies, apparently. "You know Gracie and I'd be happy to help. I've seen what you can do, Roy. I'd pity any wizard that tried to harm the kid on your watch." "Fine!" Roy snapped, barely resisting the urge to pull his hair, ignoring the beaming expressions on the others' faces. He added doggedly, "But I'll have to adopt him properly, you realise. This means through Muggle authority, and I'll need any records his parents had of him. And I hope you're not expecting me to suddenly pay for everything a baby needs on a major's salary."
"I'd be more than happy to provide everything you need to get started," Dumbledore said promptly. "I'm afraid I can't afford to send you money as he ages, but
"We can take care of everything after the initial cost," Maze hurried to assure the wizard. Roy shot him a dirty look. He'd been hoping to at least con yearly gifts out the man. His friend gave him a severely unimpressed look in reply. "When can Roy expect your items?"
I can get everything together today as soon as I return home, so you should get a package tonight. In the meantime, I suggest purchasing enough diapers and formula to get you through the day."
He seemed to notice Roy's alarmed twitch at the thought of diapers, because his grin gentled.
"Here, why don't you hold him?"
This alarmed Roy even more, and he found himself looking to Maze for help instinctively. Unfortunately, his best friend was clearly amused by his nervousness, as he simply smiled, then made the carry-on gesture at Roy. Gingerly, very uncertainly, he took Harry from the headmaster. The baby was heavier and more solid than he'd expected, and he had to adjust his grip in order to hold him securely. On his part, Harry made a soft, uncertain noise and opened his bright eyes to stare curiously at his new guardian. Roy stared back, overwhelmed.
"Excellent, my boy,"
Dumbledore said, startling Roy into a slight jump. His arms instinctively tightened on his burden.
"I leave him in your capable arms, then."
And just like that, he was striding out the kitchen and gone. Roy and Maze looked at each other for a long minute.
"I have a baby,"
Roy finally said dumbly, and Maze, the little shit, just laughed at him. Thanks for listening to Chapter 1 of The Path of Flame, and I hope you'll join me for Chapter 2. Thank you so much for listening, and check the description below for the link to the original fanfiction.